Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today we're going to be starting off here in the kitchen before we go out to the garden. Today I want to make some refrigerator pickles. Now, refrigerator pickles can be a great option. So there might be some reasons why you might prefer to make refrigerator pickles over canned pickles in certain situations. One is just if your cucumbers are coming in a little bit here and there, you don't have enough all at once to can a big batch of pickles. Refrigerator pickles are a great way to use just a few cucumbers at a time. Another reason, and this is the main reason why I actually prefer to make refrigerator pickles over canned pickles, is that they stay a lot crispier. You know, when you can your pickles, once you put them in the hot water to process them, what's happening is you are essentially cooking them in that hot water, and that can often lead to mushier pickles. I really prefer my pickles to have a crispier texture. Now, of course, there are things you can do to your canned pickles to help them stay a little bit crispier. But I still find that overall, refrigerator pickles they just have that crunch that, that's really good from a good pickle. So for that reason, I like to make refrigerator pickles. Now, there are the obvious negatives. They're not shelf stable. You do have to keep them in your refrigerator. They don't last as long. But I do find that refrigerator pickles, if they're stored properly in your refrigerator, they will still last a really long time. I don't have an exact shelf life on that, but I know that, normally when I make a batch of these, my family goes through them pretty fast. But there has been the occasional time when a jar of pickles has been kind of shoved to the back of the fridge and forgotten about. I find it, a couple months later and they're still completely fine. So the combination of the cold temperature from the refrigerator along with the preservation of the vinegar that you're going to be packing them in really does lead to a pretty long storage time in the refrigerator. One other really simple reason why you might prefer refrigerator pickles is just that they're a little bit easier. Now, it is true that canned pickles, they are one of the easiest things that you can, but refrigerator pickles are even easier than that. So that's another great reason why you may want to consider those. So in a couple minutes, we're going to go out to the garden and harvest some pickles. But before we do that, I want to make our brine so that it can start cooling while we're harvesting the pickles. To make sure that your fridge pickles stay really crispy, it is really important for the brine to be completely cooled down before you add it to the pickles. Otherwise, it's going to have a similar effect to canning your pickles. Maybe not quite so much because they're not exposed to hot brine for as long. But if you add your brine to the pickles while it's still hot, it is going to cook them a little bit, and that's going to take away from that crispy crunch that we really love from a good dill pickle. So we're going to go ahead and start the brine. We do need to heat it up because that is going to allow our sugar and our salt to fully dissolve in the brine. It's also going to allow the flavors from the seasonings that we're adding to really fully infuse into that brine. So it is important to heat it up. But as I said, we want to plan for some time to cool it down before we actually add our cucumbers. So I do have a jar ready. As I said, I'm not going to be canning these, but I do like to still store them in a canning jar. Because these aren't canned, though, you can use really any jar or container that works for you. I'm using a quart jar. I think I have enough cucumbers out there to make one, maybe 2 quarts, but we'll start with 1. The recipe that I'm using is actually scaled for a single pint of cucumbers. I'm going to double it because I'll be making a quart instead. You can certainly keep it as written. You can scale it up or down as much as you want to. I am going to go ahead and link the recipe in the video description. So feel free to follow along with me, enjoy the process. And then if you decide to make this recipe, which I do highly recommend, it's very delicious. If you decide to give this a try, go ahead and follow that link in my video description to find the recipe. So let's get started adding our brine ingredients into this pan here. So I'm going to start by measuring out a cup of white vinegar. Just any food grade white vinegar will do. And we're going to add that right into our pan here. Next, I'm also going to add a cup of water to this. So the base of this brine is equal parts water and vinegar, and then we're just going to add seasonings to make it taste extra delicious. So I have a bunch of fresh dill here. This isn't going to get added into the brine. This doesn't get heated up along with the other ingredients. We're going to add this into the jar with the pickles later. So for now, we're just going to set this aside. Into our actual brine, though, we're going to want to add salt, sugar, mustard seeds, and whole black peppercorns. And I almost forgot whole cloves of crushed garlic. That's actually one of the most important ingredients, so you definitely don't want to forget it. So I'm going to crush up 4 cloves of garlic, just crushed and peeled, and drop them right into the brine. Now, as I mentioned, this is how much garlic I like to use for a quart jar. For a pint jar, you would use 2 or scale it up or down accordingly. did crush it pretty well so that the inside of the garlic is exposed, which will allow it to infuse this brine with its delicious garlic flavor. I suppose you could chop your garlic if you wanted to. I don't think it would have any negative effect on the recipe. I like to leave it relatively whole because honestly, I like to eat the garlic out of the pickle jar too once the pickles are gone. And it's a little bit easier to fish out those mostly whole cloves of garlic. So next we are going to add half a teaspoon of sugar. I just have this organic cane sugar here. And you're going to want to add about a tablespoon of kosher salt. I'm using Redmond real salt. You can see it's got a little bit of a pinkish color to it. We're also going to want a teaspoon of whole mustard seeds. And finally, we need half a teaspoon of whole black peppercorns. So I'm just going to stir this as it heats up. We want to make sure that the sugar and the salt fully dissolve in this brine, and then the flavors from all our other seasonings are just going to infuse the brine and make it really delicious. So I'm just going to keep stirring this as it heats up to basically about a boil, and I'm just going to make sure that everything's dissolved. Once it's dissolved, I'm just going to turn the heat off, take it off the heat, let it cool, and then we'll just go out and harvest our cucumbers. So you can see that the cucumber vines have filled in really nicely. Along with, here, let's talk about this crazy pumpkin here. So this crazy pumpkin up here, you know, I have had that really sprawling pumpkin plant that is just wandering all over the garden. It decided to climb this trellis and started forming a pumpkin up here. It was originally above the trellis, and my plan was, once the pumpkin started to hang down with its weight, I was going to pull it through the trellis so it would hang below the trellis as it formed. I mean, you can see that that plan really didn't work that well for me. I think what happened was that this pumpkin grew a lot faster than I expected it to. We had a few days in a row of pretty heavy rain, so I didn't come out to the garden for a few days. And of course, the pumpkin used all that rain, absorbed, and grew really fast. So by the time I came out here and saw it, it was just ever so slightly wedged in the space in the cattle panel trellis. And I thought I'd be able to dislodge it and have it hang below. My neighbors are doing some sort of yard work, so in case you hear a lot of loud noises in the background, that's what's going on. So this pumpkin, even though it looked like it should have been able to be dislodged when I first found it, was not. So I don't think there's really anything to do about it at this point. I'm just going to let it grow like this, and I think I'm just going to have to harvest it by cutting it off the trellis, just cutting it into pieces and use it immediately. I'm thinking that my husband may have to use some power tools to get this off of here, so I'll keep you updated on this. So that pumpkin is obviously not the reason we're out here. I just figured I would mention it since it's pretty noticeable hanging there right above my cucumber patch. So let's go ahead and see what we have for cucumbers. So we've got quite a few cucumbers ready. This one here probably actually should have been harvested a couple days ago. This might be slightly better. I'm going to bring this in and cut into it. If it's not bitter, we'll use it for pickles, and if it is, it'll be snacks for the chickens. So we've got some here. More pickles down here, or, you know, future pickles, more cucumbers. So my silver slicer pickles are generally behind. We have had a couple, but this one looks really good, so this one will be brought in and turned into pickles. My other silver slicers got a really late start. I'm hoping that they do produce something before frost, but we're just going to see what happens. So here's our little harvest of cucumbers. I think this is enough to get a whole quart of fridge pickles with actually a few cucumbers left over for snacking or dinner tonight. So you can cut your cucumbers into spears or into coins, however you like to eat your pickles. I'm just going to cut them in spears because that's how my family likes them best. I definitely have more than will fit in this jar here. So I'll do 1 quart of the pickles, and then we'll just have some cucumbers for fresh eating. My brine is here. It's all cooled. I ended up, when I came inside from harvesting the cucumbers, it was still a little warm. So I stuck it in a jar in the fridge and let it cool the rest of the way. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick all this dill in the jar first. And then we'll add our pickle spears. This is probably actually the ideal size to pick your cucumbers for best flavor. You know, I have some of these larger ones. So if these are a little bitter, these will go to the chickens. I'm gonna start with these that should be nice and fresh here. I like to just cut both the ends off. And then depending on how thick the cucumber is, I'll cut it into quarters for spears. This one I made a little thick, so we'll get 5 spears out of that one. So I usually pack these jars pretty full. As you can see, I got about as many cucumbers in there as I could fit. I'm going to pour all this brine in. When you add the brine, you want to make sure that you get all of your seasonings, all of the garlic, the peppercorns, all of that. And then if there's any extra brine, I can put that towards another jar of pickles. If this doesn't quite fill to the top, I like to top it off just with a little bit of vinegar. You could do a 50-50 solution of water and vinegar, you know, either way. So I've got a little extra brine here, probably because I packed this jar pretty full of pickles. I won't need all of this, but I am just going to scoop out the garlic and mustard seeds and peppercorns and add those to this jar here. So usually I actually prefer to use a wide mouth jar for my pickles. I think that it just works a little better, makes the pickles a little bit easier to get out, but all my wide mouth jars were in use. So this regular mouth jar will work completely fine too. So this is one of the easiest recipes and one of the easiest ways to just make some use of some of that extra garden produce that you have coming in. These are delicious, and as I said, they've lasted before in my refrigerator for months. I'm not sure what their actual shelf life would be or fridge life, but they last really well and they're delicious. As I said, unless they get lost in the back of the fridge, my family goes through them long before they go bad. Now, if you want these to really taste like pickles and not cucumbers, you want to let them sit in the brine for, I'd say probably at least a couple days or so. I usually wait at least 2 days before actually eating them. But that's going to be personal preference. If you want them a little less pickled, go ahead and eat them sooner. If you want them more pickled, you can let them sit longer. So we like to wait at least 2 days, but once we have the first jar of the season going, you know, this is probably maybe the 5th jar of these pickles that I've made this year. So once we get the first one made, we just keep a rotation of them going in the fridge pretty much all summer. So thank you for hanging out with me today and making fridge pickles with me. I hope that you're encouraged to try this really easy and delicious garden recipe. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.